Empire.
Hello and welcome to another podcast that I hope provides you a distraction. Today, Michael Phillips from the Richmond Times Dispatch and I discuss all of Monday's big moves and what they mean for Ron Rivera and Dwayne Haskins in particular. Before I get to my conversation with Michael, I wanted to share a couple thoughts of my own on Monday's action. Number one, fit matters. That's a big reason why the Redskins traded for quarterback Kyle Allen. They obviously know him, having coached him in Carolina. But what I heard from people inside the organization was how he'd be good with Dwayne Haskins. When you're building a culture, this is how it's done. Now, we still don't know yet what will work and what won't. All that stuff will be determined during the season. We'll learn a lot more then. But you want to create a situation conducive to success for your players. And if you're trying to develop Haskins, then you want him in a good spot. This helps. I'm telling you, had they gone a different route with a Cam Newton or a Jameis Winston, that would not have been the case. It's not because of those players' attitudes, but because it would have signaled to Haskins that he's not their guy. Think of what he's gone through in less than a year with Washington, drafted by a staff that he knows didn't want him, eventually knew that they didn't want him, and feeling left to the side, hearing a lot of things leaked about him to the press. Now, he brought some of those things on himself. I've told you before, I felt like the coaching staff felt like he could have done a better job away from the facility of learning the offense even better. That aside, his body language was bad, and those close to him know it. I know this because I've talked to them about it. But after the past year, if you have a plan, it has to include how do you get the best out of him. Don't guarantee him anything. They haven't. But also put him in a position where he still must earn the job. That's what they've done. With Allen here, yes, Haskins knows that he should be the guy, but he still has to win the job. Why? Because he'll also know that Allen knows the offense, knows the staff, and they know him and respect the hell out of him. Haskins will still have to do the right things to win the job. I believe he'll do it. And for what it's worth, nobody has yet counted out Alex Smith. I still view him as a long shot. I also wonder, with the loss of the OTAs, how that impacts his ability to, not so much his ability to recover, but things that he could have been able to maybe show them on the field to see where he's really at. But there's, like I said, I still view him as a long shot. Number two, with Quinton Dunbar. Of course, traded to Seattle for a fifth-round pick. I was told right before free agency that there wasn't a lot of action on him. By a lot, I mean there wasn't any, despite teams knowing he was available. Now, he didn't help the Redskins by the way he handled the situation. He made a public demand before Ron Rivera had even had a chance to meet him. Dunbar's a good corner, and when this first came out, most people that I talked to pegged the value for him around the fourth round. The notion that they should have somehow tried to get a second or could have gotten a second is honestly laughable. Teams were offering 6th and 7th round picks for him. They knew that Washington wouldn't bring him back based on their knowledge of Rivera and how vocal Dunbar had become on social media. But he's also missed 14 combined games in his 2 years as the full-time starter. Why the heck would anyone give up a solid pick for a player with that injury history who also wants the new deal and is in the last year of his current one? So you can't equate this with the Allen trade. The Redskins received a player they viewed as a quality backup with a cheap deal whom they can control for a couple years. He'll be a restricted free agent after the season. This isn't about how good a player is. It's about value and the market. There wasn't a great market for Dunbar. There were a couple more teams interested, but again, nobody was offering better than what they got from Seattle. It's just not great value. Again, injuries. A guy who wants a big contract, hasn't played more than 11 games as a starter. What adds up to it being a higher pick? Nothing. We know he's a good corner, but he's got to stay healthy and prove it over the course of a season. I think if he had a couple more years left on his contract, then he could bring more in return. That's just not the case. One coach texted me saying he wasn't surprised at the Redskins only getting a fifth round pick. His point was there are lots of corners in the draft, and Dunbar has been hurt a lot. And the contract demands, he said, wouldn't help. Another front office staffer on an NFC team said he liked the deal for the Redskins because it got rid of drama and he felt they got the right return. Now, this guy also said he didn't like that Dunbar was staying in the NFC. This guy feels a good player, and I do too. They know but they know why he didn't command more on the market. And you've got to look at the big picture. As far as other corners on the market, yes, Bashaud Breeland is still out there, and nobody here has yet ruled him out for me. I like Bashaud, and I felt like he kind of got a bad rap during a few times here. In fact, the one season, I can't remember which year it was, the year where he got burned by Antonio Brown in that game against the Steelers in prime time. I actually thought that Bashaud was in really good position to make a few plays. He just didn't make them, and it made it look worse. But I didn't think the game was nearly as bad as what people made it out to be for him. And I also felt like it was a defensive scheme that really put him in a bad spot. And then there's also Logan Ryan. I don't know the Redskins' interest in him. I did have one defensive back coach in the NFL tell me how much he loves Ryan, and he wishes his team had or would sign him. All right. Finally, Monte Nicholson. Done. Time to go. That's all I've got. Then lastly, on Trent Williams, I was told over the weekend they've clearly been talking to teams. One in particular has shown more interest. I don't know who that is. I don't know where it's going yet. I do know that it all starts with Williams agreeing to a deal with another team. And what I do know is that the Redskins, while they clearly want a second-round pick, I think they know that they're going to have to negotiate those terms. They still don't want to just give him away. I think if the team offered him a third, it would be okay, what else can you give us for that? But while they want the second-round pick and they're not just going to give him away, I think they understand what the situation is. I don't think they're going to do what they did with Dunbar, which is basically just get tired of him and say enough's enough, just get him out of here. I don't think they're going to be at that point. So we'll see where that goes, but that's the latest there. After this break, I'll be back with my conversation with Michael Phillips from the Richmond Times Dispatch. Again, we talk about the big moves, what they mean for Ron Rivera, and what they mean for Dwayne Haskins. And now I'm joined by, as I always like to say, America's favorite podcast guest, Michael Phillips from the Richmond Times Dispatch. And Michael, appreciate you taking out some time to talk about this. And I hope everybody is staying sane in your household, first of all.
Podcasts are the original social distancing, John. So, we were doing it before it was cool.
There you go. Anyways, let's get to it. Redskins had a big day on Monday, a few big moves. I'm going to start off, maybe the least big news one of the day was releasing Monte Nicholson. That felt like a new move that basically had to be done.
I was told this was the Cornelius Lucas signing 2-hour breakdown podcast here. With Monte, I think the strange thing was he kept finding his way into the starting lineup here. And he's one of those guys who say, they lose a starter, but no other team's going to take him in to be a starter. He'll get a look somewhere if he wants to get a look somewhere. He'll go to somebody's camp, but you'd be hard pressed to name another team who's going to grab that guy and say that's our solution at safety. So, you can take all these moves together too, as I'm sure we will. And headaches are kind of the theme. You cut Dunbar, you trade Dunbar. You cut Monte, and that's 2 headaches you get rid of, and that's a statement for your new coach right there.
And I think that's a great point. And I was going to get to that in a little bit about what all this means in full, because I think that is true. And I think when you talk to people over there, it's always about building it right, fit, et cetera. And I don't think that Quinton Dunbar was a problem in the locker room, but I do think it was trending that way. And I don't think he's a bad guy, but I just think it wasn't going to be a good situation for him and then ultimately for them. And I think Monte, we've seen that it's just, again, I don't think he's a bad guy in the locker room, but the durability, the questions about the off-field stuff, all that stuff. So this was kind of a big statement day, don't you think, then?
Yeah, and it always comes back to production because it's the NFL. And cutting Monte was such an easy call because, if you're looking at the totality of a season, that's not a guy who's going to make you or break you. If you're leaning on Monte Nicholson, you're a 3-13 team to begin with. That's just who you are. But with Dunbar, he was he was going to be a starter. And I think,
Yes.
you can certainly line up a range of opinions on him, and everybody can think what they think about Pro Football Focus. I happen to think he's a good football player. I think he's going to be really good in Seattle too. I think they're going to take advantage of him. A great fit for him. That's a guy who, when you remove him from your football team, you're potentially making yourself, one win worse even over the course of a season. I don't know. I don't want to exaggerate this too far, but you're taking a key piece away from the team and not replacing it with another key piece. 5th round draft pick is, you might as well throw darts at the board. That's a statement move to say, hey, we're not going to do this by any means necessary. We're going to do this our way. And our way is not to, come in here and walk into a bad situation.
And I think with the Dunbar one too, he kind of put them in a tough spot right away with how this all was handled. And immediately coming out with a new regime and saying you're demanding a trade because you're not hearing from them, you don't know where you stand. And the approach with this new regime is, let's get to know you first. And he didn't want to do that. And if he's at the end of it, that's his right. That's fine. But I just think it led to for the Redskins, it led to a loss of potential value to get for him. Because I think the injuries play into that big time. It may only be a 1-year situation for Seattle, which again lowers the value. A guy like Trent Williams would end up signing an extension before he goes anywhere. So I just think it played out poorly for them, but it is a good fit for Seattle because they like the long corners, and that's what he is. If he can stay healthy, he could be pretty good out there. He just didn't stay healthy here, and that's the thing that was always the question. And then it comes down to the big word we always heard, Michael, was culture. And I would assume, how much do you feel like that plays into this? That this just feels like this is what it's about.
That's what this is. That's what the assistant coaches coming in are about. That's what bringing Kyle Allen in's about. And that's other things too. And we'll get into that. That's what bringing, Thomas Davis, my goodness, of course,
Right.
That's what bringing these guys in is all about. The more people in the building you have pulling the rope your direction, the easier this is going to be to set the culture. And the fewer guys you have pulling the other direction, the easier it's going to be. You got your guys. Yeah, I always use Ryan Kerrigan as an example because he's an easy example. He's a guy who's going to do everything Ron Rivera wants him to do. That's why he's still here. That's why he's going to be here. Ron Rivera won't have any headaches dealing with Ryan Kerrigan. You know that. And so that's a guy, maybe he's not a Rivera culture guy, whatever that means, but he gets to stay because he's not going to be a problem either.
Right.
You got the guys you bring in, your Thomas Davises. Those are guys who are going to pull you in the correct direction. But then on the other side, you got the guys who are pulling you away from that. And obviously they view Dunbar as being in that camp. It's tough. I understand why Dunbar wants to cash in right now in this moment. He's maybe never going to be thought of this highly again in his career. He's coming off of his best season. He's on a hot streak. Things are going well for him. He could get hurt next year. He could regress next year. Any number of things. This is obviously the correct time for him to cash in as a player. Contract says otherwise, though, and that's how this league works. It's a very unfair league sometimes to the players, and I think if you went to the 32 NFL teams, maybe some of them would say we'll talk about giving this guy an extension, but I don't think it'd be unanimous. Most of the teams say, "Here's your deal, play it out, and then we'll figure it out from there."
And I think the hard part for him is, he had a good year, but he only played 11 games.
Yeah.
And that's coming off a year where there's 7 games. Whereas like a guy like Trent Williams, yes, he misses games, but you see what the high level he plays at when he is there. And there's such a long track record for him, whereas Quinton has been a good corner. And I think we can all admire his rise up there. I think the other thing you wonder about is the precedent. And there's 2 ways to look at it. One, the precedent, if you're another player who's upset, you go to Rivera, maybe he's just going to ship you out of here. So if you kind of make waves, they reward you, so to speak. On the other hand, what it also feels like is Rivera knows in this first year, if you're going to get rid of guys like this, now is the time to do it. They're not playing. Everybody wants to play to win. Everybody's going to try to win. But they know that this year, coming off a 3-13 year and the disaster this place had become, that there's a little bit of a past this year. And so you have to establish what you're about and what you want to be about and what's the foundation for your program.
You don't cut corners to win in year one. You cut corners
Right.
to win in year five. That you don't come in and say, he's a headache, but we'll deal with it because he can lift us from 5 to 6 wins. Hey, that day will come. The hot seat day will come, or if things go well, the push all the chips in for the Super Bowl day will come. You look at what Sean McVay's doing out in Los Angeles, where they took on a bunch of guys last year to try to lift them over that hump to get to the Super Bowl. That's when you deal with these things. You try to lift yourself from being a 10-win team to a 12-win team by taking on the headaches. Going from 4 to 6, come on, that ain't worth it.
No, it's not. And that I remember even talking to somebody over there before where I was like, if you're gonna keep like Quinton and Trent, I'd be more apt to keep, if you feel like which one would you want to keep around in a situation where they may be playing on their last year, knowing that, I'd be more apt to keep Trent. I think he's more able to keep some things within himself. And I think we would, had they handled the deadline stuff differently, we never would have heard anything from Trent about all this. Yeah. But I also think like with Quinton, I think I could see there being more potential where you could just know he's upset. I think with Trent, he would get, my sense of the two of them is that Trent would probably get through it better. I don't know that that's going to come to that. I still think that he ends up being traded, but you know what I mean? So I wonder if you agree, if there's one that you would have said this guy would probably handle the situation better than the other.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, and this is why I went to bat for Jordan Reed every year. Nature of the injuries aside, you just say like, everybody, the fans always say, he's only going to give you 8 games. Yeah, sure, but those 8 games are so good. Like, was Jay Gruden smart to build an offense around him? No, that was a bad decision on his part because he had an irreplaceable piece that he always needed to replace. Right. But at the same time, you look at Quinton Dunbar, very good. Trent Williams, great. Like, right. If you only get 8 games from him, in those 8 games you are getting the premier NFL production at that position. Everything you said is absolutely right. The fact that we, from the time he had the surgery on his head, we didn't hear about it for months after that. He didn't speak about it for months after that. All those are completely agree.
The last transaction was the Kyle Allen trade, and what did you think when you heard that?
Well, giving away a 5th-round pick kind of felt funny until they got one back. I'm completely for the trade, and for the reason of everything's crazy right now. With this coronavirus thing, you don't want to like build a football team around coronavirus concerns, but I will say this: quarterback's the most important position on the team.
Yep.
He's a guy who knows what you want to do. He's a guy who can run all the plays you're going to install in the playbook. If you look at it this way, and shoot, I'm not a doctor. I'm not the guy who's on TV telling everybody what's going on. But I'll say this: I don't think it's unreasonable to say I don't think we're going to have OTAs this year. Right. Those are right around the corner. I don't think we're going to have that mini camp. Doubtful. I think a lot of people are kind of eyeing it with an eye towards. Hopefully we get to Richmond, start training camp, have a full training camp, full preseason, go into the year from there. But even if you do that, I think with a new coach, new system, you've got to give Haskins 100% of those reps, or at least as many as you can possibly give him. You can't cheat him out of any reps in a new system, new coach, all that. He's going to need all the work he can get. That's not a knock on him. It's a new system. And he's going to have a very compressed timetable to learn it. That's unfair to him. That's unfair to everybody. That's the league. That's what we're all up against this year. Right. That's the NFL. So because of that, you can't be training a backup. You just don't have time. You don't have time to say, well, Haskins, why don't you sit out today and we're going to give the reps to our backup because he needs to learn the system too. It's just not going to work like that. So I think from that perspective, very smart to bring in a guy who knows the system. And, everybody's always going to make everything a referendum on do they believe in Haskins. I think this is the perfect fit for a backup quarterback just in terms of saying, yes, obviously Haskins is still the starter. He's not coming in here to unseat Haskins, at least not on paper, not right away. Haskins is your number one coming into camp. I think that's important for everybody to know, at least important for him to know, that they're not bringing in an equal. They're not bringing in a Jameis where you say, like, Jameis is coming here to compete for a job. He's going to try to win it. This guy's a number two.
Right. And I think that's partly why I knew that, when I had to shoot down some of the Cam Newton and Jameis stuff because you knew it wasn't going to happen. And it's for the reason you said, you bring those guys in, they're automatically started. And it just sends such a bad message for Haskins. And I know, listen, if you think those guys are better and you want to go with them, that's fine. Then you'd have to get rid of Haskins because you're going to lose him at that point. And you can deduce whatever you want from that. If people don't like that, that's the reality. And so if you think Haskins is going to be your guy, you want to put him in a position to compete for the job. And I think that's the thing. That's the beauty with Kyle Allen here is that he's good enough to go play if you need him to, but you really know he's going to be he's more suited as a strong backup. But again, it's almost like we always talk about that Case Keenum type. He's a little bit like the early stages of a Case Keenum, a guy in terms of his story, but a guy who can go in and play and help you if you're struggling or if you're not taking care of your business. I think the other point, Michael, to what you're saying, and it's a good point about the backup reps, but the other part of it too is just to have another voice in that room for Haskins, to somebody who knows the offense and is willing to work with him. Because that's one thing I've heard about this kid is he's a pretty good kid, and they emphasize that fit. But then the other thing too, during the spring when you can't go work out, Haskins can now contact Kyle Allen and say, hey, can we get together and go over the playbook or go over these plays that are going to be called? So it gives him a better ability during downtimes to maybe learn more of the offense without having to wait to get officially get the playbook.
Yeah, you can serve that case in Colt role of guy who comes in at 6:30 a.m. just sets the tone. The quarterbacks come in at 6:30 a.m. He knows what Rivera wants. He knows when Rivera wants him in the building. He'll do that. He'll set that tone. The evolution of Case Keenum, that was making me think of like this, like caterpillar turning into a butterfly. The evolution of a Case Keenum when he finally blooms and becomes the Case Keenum he'd always been meant to be. There's a scientific poster in there somewhere, I think.
Yeah, and yeah. I'm sure there is. But it is
development of an NFL backup quarterback. He's going from competing for the job to securing the backup role to one day coming in there and managing the end of the string for a really bad football team.
Yeah, that's yes. And I think the other thing with Allen too is, and I'm a little bit, I don't want to say intrigue's the wrong word, but I do think it's that word fit. It just keeps coming up with all the stuff. And I do think he's a good fit for the situation. And I think, over the last week or so, when you talk to people, like, I didn't know where they would go with it. You always felt they wanted somebody with experience. So we kept looking for ties to these. Who are the guys with ties to staff? And anybody I'd reach out to, whether it's the Drew Stantons or Taylor Heineke, they hadn't contacted those guys. Those are guys that have ties to members of this staff. So it's kind of like, well, who the heck are they going to go after? I just wonder if they kind of figured that P.J. Walker would end up in Carolina and they'd be able to make that move to get Kyle Allen. So, I think it worked out well for them. I don't know what did you think about the 5th round pick given up for him?
Yeah, it's a quarterback and it's the NFL, so you do what you got to do, I guess. I with Dunbar, I would have thought ideally you get more. I think Dunbar is more valuable than a 5th. I think Kyle Allen probably less valuable than a 5th. That's the league, that's the price. I'll say that, on paper, and we haven't played any football games yet, it's very rare to see a win-win scenario like it's been, I think, with Carolina and Rivera, where I do think Rivera's in a good place and has been able to assemble his team. And you never win by getting fired, but I think he won as much as you could have. I think Carolina won too. I think getting Matt Rule down there was a great hire. I like what they've been. Yeah, I think what they've been doing is really good. I feel like both sides have really won from that exchange.
And what have you learned about Rivera throughout this last couple of weeks? Or I guess the first part of free agency.
Yeah, and I think that what we touched on earlier in the show, so much of this is about culture. So much of this is about fit. I got to talk to him at the Super Bowl for a little while he's making the rounds there. And one of the things was, he feels it's very, very important to be out setting the tone, setting the voice, doing that early. And I think a lot of it is what you do in the first year, what you do in your first months, what you do in your first impressions is kind of the bar, and then everything works from there. Wherever you set, this is how I want things to be. You can always relax it. You can always go backwards, but it's very hard to go forwards. You think about, Mike Shanahan, even, who was nobody's definition of like a loose on the players, but, always canceled that third day of mini camp. Well, you can never go back and have the third day of mini camp again. Like once you do, I know lots of NFL guys do that. I'm just using that as an example. Once you set the lineup, here's the policy, here's the rules, here's the culture, you can always loosen it. You can always slide backwards, but it's really hard to tighten the screws again. And really hard to do that in a locker room. And guys, we're all getting paychecks and this is their job.
And that's clearly he clearly is using this year to set a foundation. And I think when you're coming to a place where the number one word that we've all heard in a negative way is culture, then this has to be your first, and it should be your priority anywhere, because anytime you go somewhere, but I think especially here, and I think you have to establish how are you going to be as a franchise, so that way you can kind of, set the expectations for the players as well.
And while certainly we note that, this isn't going to be, a playoff contender this year, and you can weigh in on this and tell me I'm crazy if you want. I think this is a team that's going to get a few wins better just by having the coaches they're going to have in the building. I think the defense is going to get better because it can't get worse. I think this is a team where you can pencil them in for 5 or 6 wins and not feel crazy about it.
Yeah. Listen, man, if they better win 5 or 6. And I don't know that I don't want to say they're going to be much better than that, but I think you should expect that kind of, that level.
They're not going to the playoffs.
Right. I'm not going to go in there saying the playoffs.
Unless we keep expanding. When we go to the 2017 playoffs,
correct. Right.
These guys could be there in that Saturday game.
Right. But I think, and the reason I say that, I think that this staff will be good enough to expect those couple wins. And I think last year was such a bad year, and the fall off was dramatic, that I think that if you bring a solid staff in here that is focused on the future versus trying to save their jobs, and really they got to a point where they knew they were done, and so I think it just had changed completely early in the year. So I think you have to factor that into account too when you look and say this year should be decently better. Now what that means, I don't know, but so I think there's that. That's what I keep telling people too, Michael, about the free agency. When it's like, why didn't they get this guy, that guy? To me, the single biggest addition is Ron Rivera, and I think the second one is Jack Del Rio. And if they had signed Landon Collins last year. If they had signed another free agent, do you think they'd have been any different last year?
I'll say this, not to take us all the way back to last year, but it's a podcast, so we can go off the rails here. If the Dolphins don't botch the end of that game there, and Callahan loses his first game, just think how off the rails we were going to go.
Well, we were thinking about it at the time because it was certainly real. It was certainly realistic, and that would have been. I mean, I'm trying not to relive last year, but it's funny because last year seems like such a pleasant memory compared to what's going on right now. So,
I think looking back, knowing what I know now, and having a weekend where I wanted to watch March Madness, but there's no March Madness. I wish I would have appreciated that Redskins-Jets game a little more at the time.
Well, the good thing for you do have the T-shirt for the memories. So just for people listening, if they sell those, I mean, that was like the most ridiculous T-shirt ever they were selling. It was like the Redskins versus the Jets T-shirt. So if you see Michael, hopefully we see a training camp this year, and you see Michael at training camp and he's wearing that T-shirt, just ask him about it, because it's a pride and joy. To buy
I keep it under lock and key. It's my most prized possession.
Didn't you buy a second one too? Wasn't there another one?
Yeah, the one at the Giants game was so good because it was Christmas themed. It was like holiday gifts under a tree. But the only gift was how terrible the football was that day.
Uh, but you have those T-shirts, so nobody can take those away from you. Well, I guess they could.
But brighter days ahead.
I hope so. So I hope this gets better. What's been for you working from home and you have little kids? What's been the biggest challenge so far with all this?
Okay, I'm an extrovert, so I'm always like, it's driving me nuts not hanging out with people. Like, and I'm FaceTiming, texting people, all the usual things. I don't have the cows like you have out there on the ranch, so that's tough, obviously.
You have to go to the grocery store.
I've been to the grocery store a couple times. I stood in line to go to Costco. I did my time, loaded us up. I'm, to go fully off the rails. I'm unclear why we're choosing toilet paper as the thing we're hoarding right now. There are certain things like we're cooking more meals at home, so we need more food. But I'm still using the toilet this normal amount. Like I'm unclear why people thought demand would go up on that particular item. Like I don't know.
I don't get it.
It's weird. The cool thing is, my oldest is in kindergarten, so she's at school all day, and during football season, I'm gone on the weekends. Obviously, it's been very cool to spend the time with her. Get to hang out a little bit. But just in terms of us all being in the house, we're all going to kill each other.
Yeah, and
it's the only way this ends.
Yeah, I will say, having older kids and only one of whom is at the house now, it's a lot easier because you don't have to entertain them. And that's what I was thinking is like during free agency, it's really hard because I'm in my office almost the whole day, just about. I mean, I might walk around, but I'm looking at my phone, and you're not really. If my son wasn't 16 and self-sufficient, I don't know what I would do.
It's on the plus side though, your jokes would kill in this house, right? This is a prime time age for it. My material is A+.
I used to always kill that 4 and 5 year old circuit. I was big on that for a while. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I might as well be Jerry Seinfeld strutting into the room there. And I got the goods.
The sad thing is they got older and my jokes stayed the same. So that's the hard part. I'm still trying to catch up to where they're at. I'm hoping that in a few years I get there, but by then they'll have their kids, and then I can go back to my 4 and 5 year old kids tour. So. Well,
but we are still just fine in Richmond. ZZQ is still it still has takeout ordering. As soon as that ends, you'll hear the screams from here. But for now we're still all right.
Well, good. And I'm glad to hear that. And I may actually have to drive down to get some ZZQ carryout just because. But on that note, though, I will say thank you for joining me. It's been a long few days and weeks and for you, for everybody. And hopefully we get through this and we're all okay. But I appreciate you coming on as always.
Everybody stay safe out there. Really excited for football season. Hopefully we'll turn the corner back to normal, and the banter will be just as bad, but man, we're going to appreciate it so much more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Could you imagine the bits? We're going to laugh at every bit this year in the new room just because we're happy to hear words from other people in the same room. All right. Well, you can read Michael on the Richmond Times Dispatch website. Always good stuff. And tell them where they can follow you on Twitter.
Absolutely. Michael PRTD, Richmond.com is the Richmond Times Dispatch. You can pick up a printed newspaper. I don't know if you can pick up a printed newspaper anymore. I don't know. But we have a website. So there you go.
Well, they may need that printed paper for some other product because all the toilet paper's out. So whatever
can't
you
do
need
that with an iPad.
Thanks, Michael.
Take care.
Well, that's all for this week. A big thank you to Michael Phillips for joining me. Don't forget, you can read me on ESPN.com. I had a couple stories on ESPN Monday talking about the Redskins free agency and some insight into their strategy. But most of all, thank you for tuning in. I'm not going to be able to come up with a vaccine or any kind of a miracle drug, but I hope I can divert your attention for a half hour every so often. Stay safe.